You need to go plus. You need to go plus.
I didn't see it.
I'll just say this. Yeah. All right, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. This is the first seminar type workshop that I've done, so it's still a learning experience for me. I hope you guys get a whole bunch of information. If I'm talking too fast, I want this to be a dynamic environment where you guys can communicate with me as I communicate with you. It's not a one-sided conversation. So if you got questions, you can raise your hand, you can interject at any time. If you think that I'm rambling, you can just, boo me off stage, whatever you want to do. So we're going to get started. The dog training seminar in Maryland. I'm going to be the instructor, Shane McNamara, and we're going to move forward to the next slide. So aside from just dog training, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner, I'm big into motivation, and I like, speaking motivation into people and encouraging a positive environment. So I have little quotes in here too, keep you guys motivated so that, when you leave today, it's just not the most boring lecture that you had. You can take some positivity and some maybe, inspiration from it. This is one of my favorite quotes. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. So this applies really to anything. Whether you want to start a nonprofit, you want to start a business, you want to start working on a difficult dog, you just have to get started. You've got to start doing something with it. You don't have to have the full plan, but you need to just get moving with it, and that's something I believe in. So a little bit about myself. I'm not a big person to love, showboat or talk about myself, but you guys need to know my credentials, where I came from, and who I am. So my name is Shane McNamara. I served 6 years in the Air Force Security Forces as a handler and trainer. I was stationed in Volgaway, Germany. That's near, it's a little tiny province called Kaiserslautern. So that was my first military base that I went to. It was very special because I actually got to be a police officer in the military. Typically, the police officers in the military only have a jurisdiction the size of the base, right? But this is a special base where we had to control every single military member in Germany. So there's people who are living off base in Germany, we're responding, getting to do real police work. My second base, which is pretty much everything that mattered, was Andrews Air Force Base. So as you guys know, Andrews Air Force Base is a premier joint base of many different militaries, entities working together for a single mission. And that single mission at Andrews is the President of the United States, the Vice President, Secretary of State, and all VIPs that come through. So the President doesn't land at airports. He lands into the military base, his entourage comes in, picks him up, and they leave. Some of the presidents and people that I worked with was Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton. I was there for when Trump first got elected.
We're sorry.
So I worked for all different political affiliations and people, and the point is the mission is the same, and we do the same training for whoever we're working for. And at that level and that tier of training, so we were looking for bombs to protect the president, the stakes are high. So my training, I went to Lackland Air Force Base, that's in San Antonio, Texas, and it's a 3-month training school. We learn canine health and welfare, principles of conditioning, commands, corrections, canine physiology, and psychology, and then my deployments, all of Africa, and a brief tour in Afghanistan. I got this to break up the seriousness. So, can anyone tell me what kind of dog likes to take a bath?
None of mine.
No? A shampoodle. Stupid. Let's go. I just wanted to lighten it up. All right, so what we're going to cover in this course today is we're going to understand dogs, and this gets in depth with understanding dogs and dog breeds. Different breeds have different purposes. We're going to get into that. Other super important is kennel care. If you're going to run a nonprofit, you're going to run a business, or you're even going to take care of your dog properly at your house, you need to have proper sanitation and care. That's number one. Without proper sanitation and care, you're going to have sick dogs, and you're going to have a negative environment for them to exist in. We're going to get into the training aspect, where we're talking about command voices, needs and drives, principles of conditioning, what is basic obedience, What is advanced obedience? Within teaching obedience, there's things that we do to teach the dog, and that's luring, marking, rewards, training, and then I'm going to teach you about training timid and difficult dogs. Pretty much all of you guys here with the rescues constantly deal with these timid, nervy, scared, psychologically damaged dogs. And I'm going to give you guys some tips and techniques and things that I do and you may already be doing, but we can confirm amongst each other that you're actually doing the correct thing. We're going to talk about positive e-collar training. And today, whoever is lucky, whoever Astrid picks out of those little papers is going to win the e-collar, and you're going to be trained on how to use it. And then finally, we're going to start talking about reward schedules, and then I'm just going to throw some motivation in there to keep you guys motivated. So, are you guys excited to learn? Yeah. Awesome. All right. Let me catch my breath. I'm talking so much. So, understanding dogs, right? We know they don't speak English. Can anyone tell me of any dogs that they've seen that speak English? Maybe they understand some sentence structure, or they understand single words or maybe a couple of words, but they don't understand grammatical English language. So we can't have expectations for dogs within human language. We're going to have to learn something that we were taught, and it's called clear signals training. So you have to have clear signals to communicate with this animal. We're not going to say, hey man, I need you to stop doing that. I'm going to need you to come over here. Can you sit next to me and can you watch the TV just for a little bit, please? No, it's not going to work. We're just going to have a clear communication with the animal. So the other point that I make here is they don't know how to operate in our world. We have our human dynamic, right? The way that we communicate with each other, the way that we interact with each other, the way that I greet you is on a human level. We can't have human level expectations to a dog unless we've classically conditioned the dog to accept our behavior or learn our behavior. So I'm going to teach you how to, classically condition the dog to interact in our human world. And that goes into everything has to be taught. Like I just said, don't have any expectations for any dog unless you've conducted a series of conditioning and training. If you're telling this dog to sit and come and it's not listening, that's thrown back on you because you haven't done enough conditioning with this animal to get it to do it. The only reason that animals do things for us is for something in return. I'm sorry, you guys aren't best friends when you first start. They're not doing it because they love you. They're doing it because you've conditioned them with a treat. Eventually, a bond and a relationship can build, and then you can have that love and rapport. But in the end, you're feeding them, you're petting them, you're praising them. They're doing something out of a drive, or they're doing something out of a need, and you're going to learn what needs and drives are. What's here? So yeah, breeds. Everyone's like, oh, it's because this breed or that breed. This is an arguable and debatable subject. To some degree, breeds do matter because they're bred to do specific tasks, right? Terriers, bred to go into a pipe or dig a hole, rip a rat to pieces. So now this dog is in your house ripping stuff apart. So the breeds do matter. But when you're looking at a dog in terms of just training, you want to look at the dog's drives. So if the dog has drives, and I'm going to teach you what drives are, then you can train it. But a dog lacking drives is going to be very difficult to train. So let's go on to the next one. I'm going to get some water.
Question. Well, which breed, you probably get this question, which breed would have the most drive?
Most drive,
and
Malinois.
It's not based on
Malinois.
the breed.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hands down, Malinois, Dutch Shepherd, German Shepherds, all these herding breed of dog, cattle dogs, their drives are through the roof. And when I explain what drives are, and I should have structured the slides, this is, like I said, this is a learning experiment. As I conduct the next course, I'll have the slides in better order. But back to your question, the drives of these dogs, they're pretty much bred to protect like a flock, right? So, and they're instinctively hunters. So when a squirrel or something flies past them, it's an autonomic response where their brain just locks and they take off after it. There's no thought process to it. These are genetic, what's the word I'm looking for? Like genetic traits of a dog that aren't even trained. And we look for these to train the dog because we can use their drives to train them. So I wish I would have put the other slide. So I'm gonna hold off on drives until we get to the slide, and I'm gonna break down what a drive is and what a need is, and then you can understand how you can use these to manipulate and train the animal to do what you want it to do. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was kennel care and sanitation. It's like one of the first things we're taught in our school, because if you're leaving dogs in kennels or you're taking them out, you're swapping different dogs from kennels, there's different bacteria that can form. There's giardia, there's a whole host of nasty shit that can just affect dogs. So the majority of dogs, their immune system is higher than humans, but whether you believe in a higher power or not, there is it created a what's the word I'm looking for? Sometimes my brain works faster than I can actually process and think. But there is their own host of issues that can come and attack dogs, different than humans, like different viruses, different bacterias, and things of that sort. So cleaning the kennels and maintaining the health and the welfare of the dog is number one. If you can't do that, you shouldn't be working with dogs, and you shouldn't have dogs. You need to be washing their pans out regularly, using the proper cleaning chemicals for the dogs, and you need to use the proper sanitation and checkups for maintaining these animals. Whether they're your pet or not, you need to take care of them. So, like I said, it's crucial to having healthy animals. A good rule of thumb that pretty much everyone has available in their house and is a safe method of cleaning is 1 cap of bleach per 1 gallon of water. That's the perfect substrate mixture to kill bacteria and organisms like that. So you just mix 1 cap to one gallon. If you got 5 gallons, 5 caps. It's a pretty easy ratio to remember.
Those people are here for the
If we get into food storage, so you want to keep food storage clean, and you want to constantly look for spilled food. What do you think is going to be attracted to dog food? Pretty much every single rodent, right?
Yeah.
What type of bacteria do rodents carry?
Lots.
Pretty much everything. They created the bubonic plague that wiped out human beings. So you want to make sure that you stress this. You keep a clean environment. You have your food and your sanitation in a certain area, and it's cleaned and regulated. Sanitation is a must. Clean bowls. We got into that, and avoid keeping dogs near any sort of stagnant water. So if you've got your kennel runs in the back and you've got stagnant water that's not draining on the property, you need to take in consideration of how you need to mitigate that drainage and not let the water build up. Because what's attracted to stagnant water? Mosquitoes. What do mosquitoes carry for dogs? Heartworms, Lyme, all this sorts of stuff. So I think you guys got that. Let's go on to the next slide. So this is a little quote that just, Winston Churchill. The pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. So just because you have a difficult dog or something like that, don't look at it as being a burden. Look at it as an opportunity to challenge yourself. Look at it as, I'm taking on this challenge and I'm going to look at this animal and I'm going to fix it. Or if you're just getting frustrated, try not to have that pessimistic mindset about something. You're being challenged. You're lucky to be challenged. You're not going to always know everything. So we're all learning and growing. All right, so we're going to start here with getting into training. So the first thing when we talked about animals not understanding English or language, it's slightly debatable. They do understand our voice and when we're communicating with them, and they can learn to pair action with words. So is that, if you were to ask an English linguist, do they really understand language? No, they don't understand language, but they understand single words. Just because you know 2 words in Spanish doesn't mean you know this. You speak Spanish, right? You don't understand language. So the way that we do, it's called clear signals training. If this is important for you guys to write down. So the way that we operate within clear signals training is to use different voices. So for a start, we have 3 different voices that we use to communicate with a dog, and they're crucially important. If you're not doing these, you're not going to get the best outcome with the animal. because they're going to be bored. The first voice that we use is the praise voice, and people will look at you when you do a praise voice in public properly. People are going to look at you like you're mentally ill. So it was a funny story when we were in the Air Force going through K9 school. They wouldn't let us work with real dogs in the beginning. What they would do is they would give us a big stuffed animal dog, and they would put a collar and a leash on it. And you know, we're all these tough military people. You know, we don't have emotions. You got to stand with bearing, and you got to stare and not move, right? But guess what? Now we got to take it backwards a little bit, and we've got to have you praise this animal because you told it to sit, it did it, and now it deserves to be paid. You think of it like an employee, right? You're going to be paid. But these animals, the way that they communicate with each other is with noise and sound and even facial expressions. So a praise voice is the dog's payment. It's a form of payment to the dog. So a proper praise voice needs to be very high pitched. And for a lot of men, it's difficult to pull out that Mickey Mouse voice and go, "Good boy, good boy, good boy!" She'll rise. Yeah, so that's a proper praise voice. If you're not doing that, you're not making training fun. If you're like, sit, good, okay, come, good boy, you know, and then you're like, no, no, and then you're giving commands, it's not a fun training experience. And do you think the dog's going to want to work with you or even have a rapport with you? No. So try giving a proper praise voice and see the reaction of the dog.
So you're saying there needs to be clear differentiation.
Clear differentiation of the pitch of your voice when you're giving praise, when you're giving a command, when you're giving correction. So we're moving to command voice. If I'm going to command, now command sounds really like authoritative, but this is a military term. A command is me giving you a directive. It's saying, hey, can you get my camera? Can you please bring me that chair? The way that we do that is pretty monotone. So if I was going to say, like, Aaron, can you stand up? Right? That's a command. But I said it with a normal voice. So you want to have your praise voice be a high pitch. You want to have your command voice be a level voice. And then Aaron doesn't want to stand up. But guess what? I've done like a million conditioning drills with Aaron, and he's purposely being disobedient. So I'm going to correct Aaron, and I'm going to pull out my correction voice. No! Sit. You see what I'm saying? So you can go back and forth with these voices, and you can fully control a dog, and you have clear signals. There's no corrections, there's no nothing. But the way that correction voice, aside from just being abrupt and scary, the way that we were taught in the military is that it's done through classical conditioning. So the way that the correction voice gets power is because a physical action was done to the dog paired with that voice. So when he didn't listen, I went, no, come, and I corrected him, right? No, it's a collar correction. I'm going to teach you how to properly use these in proportion that's fair to the dog. But that's how that correction gets its authority, is because it was paired with a physical thing.
But you
Yeah.
said the command voice is this as we're talking about. That's small.
Yeah, for a lot of dogs too, they just understand that when you go no, that's a correction, or that's a correction, because the way the dogs communicate with each other is through growling. So the low no is very derivative of a growl. It's a low pitch. They understand tones and pitches. Good boy, good boy, good boy. No, it's a growl. You see, I went from happy to sad, and then that's just how dogs understand it works. It's a method that works. So have those 3 different voices and focus when you're using them, and then when you're doing training, make sure that you make it a fun, interactive training experience. And the other thing is, you don't do it for long periods of time. So like Asher is a 9-month-old puppy, but she is a Malinois, so she has insane drive for prey drive and play, and that's what she just wants to do. I can work her for upwards of 30 minutes, but that's derivative of her breed. You may get other dogs that only have attention spans or puppies, and you can only do a 5-minute training session. So you need to use lots of praise, and you need to elevate your voice, and you need to make it fun and engaging for the animal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And then I'm going to teach you how to get some control and power over the animal with the correction. And the way that the Air Force is actually doing things now is they're totally getting rid of correction, but that's because they're serving a mission and a purpose. When you're searching for bombs or you're searching for drugs, the dog is in we just call it drive. So the dog is in drive to work, and he's motivated, he's sniffing, he's working. So what we do is we just after he finds something, we pop the Kong out of its mouth, the toy, and then the dog is excited and we continue him on to searching. There's no negative reinforcement or anything like that. That's where the Air Force is going. But for the method of training, let's say you're a dog trainer and someone pays you to train a dog within 3 weeks, there's no way for certain dogs that positive reinforcement alone is going to change behavior, especially in a time constraint. So the only way to change behavior is to give correction. But you can't give correction unproportionate to the animal, and you can never do it through like smacking or physical corrections or stuff like that. You want to do a professional collar correction to the dog, redirect the dog, then reward the dog. And it's a highly efficient method. And I'll show you correction, redirection, reward, and we'll get into that later. So as I said, there's a lot of stuff that gets into this, and especially with different dogs. I was going to explain earlier that there's literally 1 million different dog training tools. So you have martingale collars, you have pinch collars, you have choke chains, or in the professional world we call them control collars. We don't call them choke chains. That's just what the civilian world calls them. People that are uneducated call them. I hate to say it, they're uneducated on dog training, so they call them choke chains, but they're not. That's not what they are. The professional term is control collar. We have halty collars, we have harnesses, we have new inventions almost like every month that are coming out for controlling a dog. But for your guys' sake, what you need to know is that all of these things, you need to think of them as tools, right? You've got a screwdriver, you've got a saw, that's how I break it down into an analogy. If you have a job, and we're looking at this animal as a job, we're gonna have to use the proper tool, because we may not know what the proper tool is, but we're gonna try it at the lowest level, and then we may need to go up to a certain level and use the appropriate tool to get the response that we want for training. Now you guys are in a different business where you're in long-term rehabilitation of an animal. You can use strictly purely positive methods as long as you're doing it appropriately to fix these animals over a long period of time. But if you've only got 4 weeks to train a dog and it doesn't have mental issues, you can give corrections, you know what I mean? And I explained this outside earlier, is you can think of this even as with humans or children. If you work with children from the suburbs, right? They've never been through any sort of adverse things in their life, and he comes over to the table and I don't want him touching my wallet, right? And I smack his hand, he's gonna be like, ah, and then walk away and understand. But let's say I go into the inner city on some hardened kids that have had, been adopted, been through this family, this. I smack his hand, he may jack my jaw immediately. That's the same thing with these animals. There's certain things that you do with these animals that you can do with one that you can't do with other. And if you're training and you're gonna be a trainer, you need to know what you can use on this animal and what you can't. And honestly, you will make mistakes. You will possibly use the wrong thing. But the thing is you need to recognize that, oh, maybe I gave that correction too hard. The dog threw a response. The perfect example was yesterday when I was assessing her dog. That was, has all these host of things going on with it. When I'm assessing a dog, I will go out there and I will push the boundaries of the dog so that I can see really what's wrong with it. I gave her dog a correction when he tried to run away from me, and I was able to identify by the way the dog reacted what's wrong with him. So when he took off running and I corrected him and stood my ground and he got, corrected, the dog literally went into, it's called like disorientation. So if you were ever in a PTSD type of situation, let's say you were in combat and mortars are going off around you, some people have a response where they go into disorientation. They don't even know what's happening around in the environment, but your autonomic responses in your brain for survival will kick in, and you may hurt somebody, but you don't know what's happening and you just are responding at a primal level. Does that make sense? So when I corrected her dog, he went into like complete freak out mode. No normal dog acts like that unless it's been through trauma or it has just psychological issues that are, just deep rooted. Just like people, there's a whole host of mental issues that dogs can have. So I went out there, assessed her dog, gave it the correction to see what's wrong with it. Is he really aggressive? When I give him the correction, is he human aggressive? Is he going to attack me? If he would have just came after me and only been focused on me, then he's an aggressive dog, right? But I gave him the correction and he went in disorientation and just wanted to scream and bite, you know, he was biting at the air and screaming. So we know that this dog has like deep-rooted trauma. I got off track, I went on a full rant there. But did you guys have any questions about that?
I said, he's mine.
Yeah.
No, I think
He won't be
was
adopted
talking
out.
We all have that on
about
Yeah, so once we got him to stop
Harley.
out of his like disorientation where he was focusing on everything in the environment and freaking
Oh,
out,
yeah, true.
I redirected him through positive means and told him to come, and then he got rewarded and petted and he came out of his state. So if you give a dog a correction like Astrid, she doesn't have any mental issues. She's never been through trauma. She's a solid nerve dog. She's not nervy, scared of her environment. But she does something I don't like, I give her a correction, and then I'll redirect her. So let's say I was telling her to come, right? But she wanted to go this way. I give her a correction, and you guys are going to do this tomorrow. I say, no, come, and then I correct her, and then I redirected her to come back, and when she did it, I rewarded her. So it's essentially like if you did something, I smacked you on your hand, but I said, come over here and do this. Oh man, you did that really great. It builds confidence, and you can give corrections and still build confident dogs. And I've done it for years now with extreme success. So, and it's easier to show with the demonstration if I get Astrid to do that, and I'll do that later. Let's move on. So this is what I really want to get in, is understanding needs and drives. And it's pretty simple because it's broken down. These are needs. A dog can't survive without these needs. It has to have them. And you can't take them away from it, otherwise it dies. Oxygen, water, food. Out of these three things, we can only manipulate one of them to get a response out of a dog. And the one thing that we can manipulate without having detriment to the dog or killing it is food. The way that we use food through manipulation and training is to diminish that resource. So you get dogs that are kind of food motivated, they show interest for food. You diminish that resource down, you can skip their dinner, and then the next morning, use their food as training. They're going to be more motivated to work for a diminished resource. You can never do that with water, and the reason being is because within an hour, a dog can go into heat stroke, it can go into dehydration and a whole host of issues, so you never mess with water. Dogs are allowed to have unlimited water. Don't mess with water because they die, and they die fast. Especially, that's what they taught us in deployed environments, hot atmospheres. You're living in Texas, you're training with the dog out in the 102-degree weather. Don't play with the water, you can play with the food because it takes about 7 to 10 days before something happens. Oxygen, no brainer. You're not going to choke him out because he didn't listen. You're just an asshole and you shouldn't be working around dogs if you're choking dogs out, right? Now, there is an aspect of when we're using police dogs and we have to get them off of a bite. So this is some extra information. This is very higher level stuff. When the dog is in drive, and we're going to talk about it, pain, socialization, prey drive, defensive drive. When the dog is in drive, it's in a one-state locked mind, right? It's not thinking about anything besides maybe defense. So I have to defend myself, and I'm going to do anything by all means to defend it. It's just thinking about that. It's primal. So when the dog is on a bite, and a lot of police agencies, it's called escaping the dog off of the bite, or they use a transfer drill. But you have to take the dog's collar, roll it up, and it cuts off the circulation of air for a brief second so that the dog can breathe and open its mouth, and then they remove it off of the suspect, right? But the reason they do that is because it keeps the dog in drive. When they escape a dog off of a bite, it amplifies his drive even more, and now he wants to come back and bite even harder. So that's a method where technically they're messing with a need, right? They're manipulating that oxygen supply for a brief second. But for basic pet training and stuff, never mess with a dog's collar or choking. That's used to get a dog off of a bite. And you can use that if a dog is fighting and it has the lock on, like pit bulls, how they just lock on. If you're strong enough, and it takes the strength of like a full-grown man to twist that collar, raise the dog up, cut circulation of air off until that 1 second he opens his mouth, and then you can remove. But you've got to have the skill, the physical prowess to be able to do that. We're going to talk about drives, right? So we got pain, socialization, prey drive, and defensive.